Hey folks, it's Shane from Performance EV. Today we're going to rate our Porsche EV conversion. Hey folks, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. So as those of you that have been watching for a while know, I am a bit of a car nut. Even though I'm focused on EV conversions at the moment, I do actually really like cars, however they're powered. And you know, in order to keep myself motivated for doing this build, I do actually watch quite a lot of other automotive YouTubers and see what they're doing on their builds and how they're doing their channels and stuff. One of the YouTubers that I watch just called out all other automotive YouTubers in an effort to try and, I think, up the game when it comes to the quality of builds that are being put out on people's various channels. So this guy in the States, Tavarish, he does some really cool builds on pretty exotic cars, so Lamborghinis and McLarens and that sort of thing. And he's basically set this test that he wants other YouTubers to rate their builds against, and it's out of a possible 100 points against a set of criteria looking at things like the bodywork, the mechanicals of the car, the drivability, both, you know, I guess the car itself and also what went into getting it there. So even though I haven't finished this build yet, I still am going to challenge the car. I'm still going to rate it based on these criteria just to see how it's doing at the moment. And that gives me a benchmark, something I can work against and work towards improving as I finish off this build. Because actually we're getting much closer. Even though it's slowed down a bit, I really want to be able to put a bit more time into it and get this car on the road as soon as possible. So yeah, let's look at this car against the test. So the test that's been set, as I said, out of a possible 100 points across 5 categories, 3 of which have quite detailed subcategories under them. So the main categories are legality, paint and bodywork, mechanical, drivability, and does it hit its purpose. The legality one and the purpose one are basically just pass and fail. It's either road legal and drivable or it's not, and it either hits its purpose or it doesn't. The others are a bit more detailed. There are 5 subsections in each one worth 5 points, and basically you're rating yourself against how things match up to that. So if things are perfect, you get your 5 points. If it's unacceptable, you get 0. You get 1. Marginally serviceable is 2. Acceptable is 3. Very good is 4. I'm probably going to give myself a few zeros as well because the car's not on the road yet. I'm being harsh, but I think that's only fair. So yeah, let's dive into it. So the first point is legality, and this is a pass or fail one. Is basically, is the car registered and insured and actually drivable on the street? This one is worth 5 points, and I get a total of 0 because the car is currently not registered. So with that, the car is currently what we call in the UK SORNed. So I've made a statutory off-road notice to the DVLA to say that the car is currently off the road, not being used, and therefore please don't tax me. I can get it back onto the road at any stage, but in order to do that, I have to get an MOT, which means I have to be able to drive the car to an MOT test centre. And currently that's not an option. So car is not registered, therefore I get no points for this criteria. Off to a good start. The next area of focus is paint and bodywork. First, there are 5 subcategories in this, all worth 5 points each, for a total of 25 points on paint and bodywork. So the bodywork quality of this car is not actually too bad. There are very few dents, dings, or anything like that, but there are a few areas that will need attention. So out of a possible 5 points, I'm going to say this one's actually a 4. There's no real dent pulling that needs to be done. and it's all the panel gaps are as the way it left the Porsche factory. So the next criteria after this is metalwork quality. So this one is based on kind of the methods used to repair or enhance any parts of the car. So I have done some metalwork repairs in the car, and that's on the sills down by the rear wheels, where I had to patch in new metal. So I'm going to give myself a 5 for that, because I did use a genuine Porsche panel. I welded it in the way it should be, tack welded the entire way around so it is totally seamless, thin skim of body filler, and then I covered it with the OEM rubberized undercoating, multiple layers of that, to try and get the same finish as before. So I've done as good as I can on that one. The car's kind of subframe is still intact. The unibody, whatever you want to call it, is as strong as when it left the factory. So I'm going to give myself a 5 for that one. I think that's probably going to be my only 5. So the next topic is paint quality. Going to start falling down here. So from a distance and from certain angles, this car actually looks pretty good. But there are definitely angles where it doesn't, and there are definitely areas where the paint has suffered. The worst one is the front driver's side wing, where there was a cut, slight gash in the clear coat, and through being under covers and that over winter, water got in there and stayed in there and basically has caused it to effectively delaminate. So that's going to have to be sanded back and hopefully just re-clear coated, but we'll see when we get to that. Overall, the rest of the car is actually in okay condition. So there are a handful of little points where paint has come off just through stone chips and that sort of stuff, which are going to have to be touched up. But there's nothing major apart from that piece on the front wing. So I'm going to give myself 3 points for this one. So then the next point is materials used, and this kind of goes back to both paint quality and metalwork quality. So were the correct materials used for applying it? So wherever I have repaired the metal, I've used thin skim of premium body filler and sanded that back to the correct specs so it's perfectly smooth. And then for anywhere that I've had to do kind of grind metal back or grind sealant or whatever back to just clear out any rust, I've then put seam sealer back in and covered that again with the correct rubberized undercoating. So I think I'm pretty close with this one. I'm going to give myself a 4 for this one. And then we're looking at the finish of the work. So I can't really give myself a 5 for this one because I'm not actually finished doing the work. So while I've used the correct methods as far as getting to the rubberized undercoating, I still haven't painted over that, finished that off correctly. My plans are that when I do, I will be very fastidious about it and make sure that I do it properly. So hopefully I'll be able to get a 5 for this in future, but there's still work left to do. So I'm only going to give myself a 3. So that means out of a total of 25 possible for paint and body, I'm only getting a 19. That's going to be as high as I get, I think, for any of these subsections, because actually this is a pretty solid car. It has suffered over its life through some of its previous owners, but there's nothing actually majorly wrong with it from a bodywork perspective, which takes it on to mechanical. So this is where things are going to get interesting. We've got 5 subcategories under this: general operation, visual inspection, abnormal noises, components torqued to spec, and completeness. And I think it's only going to get worse for me on this one. So in terms of general operation, that's looking at things like, does the engine run and drive? You know, if it's a petrol engine, does it idle correctly? Does it rev cleanly? Does the transmission go into gear? So I obviously have my electric motor and I have a single gear, and I have tested those and they work. So when I put it into forward, it goes forward. When I put it into reverse, it goes backwards. But there is still some tuning to do, I think, on that. And that will happen once we get everything back into the car, and we can actually look at really digging into the parameters and that control the motor, and there'll be plenty of time spent on that. But it works and it drives, so I'm going to give myself a 3. Then we've got a visual inspection. So that is, I guess, are there any leaks? Are there any anything missing? Are there any perished bushes? And I think from a mechanical perspective, I'm doing pretty good here. So the transmission is filled with fluid, and that is not leaking. The brakes are filled with fluid, and that's not leaking. I've replaced all the suspension components, so the bushings are all nice and fresh. The only ones I haven't replaced are the anti-sway bars, and basically they're actually in really nice condition even for their age, and I'm going to keep those for the moment because I don't know whether I want to upgrade the sway bars or not. If I don't, I might replace the bushes at some point, but that's not really necessary right now. I guess where I'm going to dock myself points is not all the hoses and things are actually in place, so I don't yet have the hoses going from the radiators to the EV components, and none of them are filled with fluid. So I'm going to dock myself 2 points for that and just give myself another 3. It's going to get worse from here though. So the next one is, are there any unintended noises or vibrations coming from the running of the drivetrain? And to be honest, I don't know at this point, because last time I tested, I had my old engine mounts and they were really soft, and definitely there was clunking coming every time I changed from reverse to forward, just because there was too much movement in the mounts. So I've currently got it hard mounted, which means I'm pretty sure there are going to be abnormal noises and vibrations when I run this, but hopefully it'll be enough to shake it down, and then I will get some proper mounts made that have bushings and stuff in them to kind of even out those abnormal noises and vibrations. I'm giving myself a 0 for this one. Next is, are the components all torqued to spec? So that's any critical components, are they fully torqued to spec? And at the moment, the answer is no. So I've had the front subframe out to put to get into the space where the petrol tank was. I've briefly reinstalled all that to get the car out into the sunshine for a while, but it's going to have to go back into the garage. I'm going to be dropping that again to get at the space again. So none of those suspension components are torqued to spec. They're just tight enough that it won't fall apart while I push it around the place. Same goes for the rear. I've replaced all the components, but I haven't yet torqued them to spec. So there's still a lot of work to do in that. I'm going to have to give myself a 0 again. So the next thing is completeness. Are all the components where they need to be? And the answer for me is no, they're not. I have an inverter and a motor installed in the car, but the charger and the battery are still in my garage. So they're definitely not in the place they're supposed to be. In fact, they're probably at least 10 meters away from where they're supposed to be. So that's going to have to be another 0. So out of a possible 25 points for the mechanicals, I've given myself 6. Now we're moving on to drivability. So this is looking at both the driver experience, as in sitting in the car and looking at the dash, as well as the actual driving of the car. So the first area is called diagnostics, and that's focusing on things like the gauge cluster and whether it's free of warning lights and that sort of thing. And actually, I'm going to give myself a 3 for this, because there aren't actually any warning lights showing up when I turn on the car, even though I've removed the ECU. But there's also only the speedo working, so I still need to get things like the fuel gauge and the tachometer and everything showing something relevant. So I'm going to use the fuel gauge. I'm going to take try and get the battery power to show up in the gauge cluster. For the rev counter, I'm going to pull info from the revs of the motor, though it's not going to be a one-to-one relationship because the motor is going to rev higher than the Porsche engine used to. So I'm going to get those working, but I'm taking solace in the fact that there's no warning lights showing, and so I'm going to give myself a 3 on this one. Maybe I'm being a little bit generous. Next one is going back to abnormal noises and vibrations, but this is looking at the driving, so it'll be things like suspension or squeaks and rattles coming from the dash. And to be honest, this thing is going to rattle. So not least because I haven't tightened up the suspension yet, but also I've installed, but again partially uninstalled, the new dash and interior, and I'm sure that's going to rattle when I first drive it until I kind of dig through and find all the missing clips and that sort of thing. So I'm only going to be able to give myself a 2 for that. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's serviceable. So we're not starting from nothing. Next is performance, and this one is about, is the performance at least as good as when the car left the factory, or if not even better, or is it at least as good for the platform that's on it? And at the moment, even once I get the car driving, no, it's not going to be OEM performance yet. As I've said before, I want to really push the Nissan Leaf components and see how much we can get out of them. But I do expect that this inverter especially will max out below the 220 kilowatts I need for the that the Porsche had when it actually left the factory. There are other Nissan Leaf components, newer inverters, that I think probably can be pushed that far, but I want to go with what I've got first, thrash it until it can't take any more, and then we'll look at upgrading. But that means that certainly initially this car is not going to meet that criteria. That's another 2, I think. So then we've got alignment. I think with this one I'm going to probably max out at a 2 again. All the suspension components are new, so everything is straight, and the bushings are solid. So actually getting the car into alignment is not going to be an issue. It's not as if there's strange wear or anything anywhere that would make lining things up a problem. So I think, yeah, I'm going to give myself a 2 for this one. It's not got an alignment yet, but it's going to be very, very possible to do one properly once I get the car on the road. So then the last criteria for drivability is the 1,000-mile drive. Can this car drive 1,000 miles, or has this car driven 1,000 miles? And as this car has not yet left the driveway, I think I can only give myself a 0 for this. I think when it does hit the road, I would love to do a 1,000-mile drive and see how it gets on, but in order to do that, I will probably need to take quite a bit of time, because I'm going to have to stop to recharge it every 120 or 130 miles. So that's going to be 8 or 9 recharges over the course of the challenge. So for drivability, we've not done very well again. I think maybe I could push a 9. That's probably being generous on myself. So the final section is purpose, and this is just a single pass or fail criteria worth 20 points, and that is basically, does the car meet its purpose? So I've probably not really talked about it much, but the purpose I have for this car is to create effectively a daily driver EV for me that's a bit more fun than a lot of the stuff out there. So I'm sure I could buy a second-hand Leaf or Zoe or something like that for what I'll end up spending on this car, but I want something that makes me smile when I drive it, and yeah, I'm hoping that this will be it. So the criteria is, for me, its purpose is to be a daily driver that I can use for local trips, that I can take road trips in if I want to, that'll put a smile on my face and get me from A to B very reliably with 0 emissions. And if we manage that, then I'll have hit my purpose. But for the moment, it's sitting on my driveway, not doing anything, so that's a 0. So that's kind of my response to Tavarish's challenge. I think I managed to get 34. So I hope you've enjoyed this look at the project from the challenge perspective and see how it stacks up against other builds out on YouTube. I'm not sure I'm really hitting the mark at the moment, but I think with what we've got planned, there's a good chance we'll get some pretty good marks for this one. So I hope you join me for the rest of the build. And yeah, hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Drop a like or a comment in the comment section. I always appreciate that. I do try to respond to all comments, even if I'm a bit slow at it sometimes. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.